My mother-in-law drops her grandkids off at my house, insisting they're mine after my husband finds out about her affair and hidden daughter. I'm 28 years old, and I've been married to Ree, 30, for 4 years. We've known each other for 8 years, and after about 6 months of dating, he introduced me to his family. Most of them accepted me, but his mom, Ruth, never did. Ruth, 56, has always acted strange around me. I knew she didn't like me, but she'd just ignore me when I visited and avoid talking to me as much as possible. Last week, I was alone at home because Ree was away at a business retreat. It was one of those trips where no one can use their phones or talk to anyone unless it's an emergency. We all knew we wouldn't be able to reach him for several days. On the 4th day, Ruth showed up at my door with 2 kids I didn't recognize. They were both under 10, and not a word came out of their mouths while they were here. Ruth didn't exactly drop by. She rang the bell several times before I finally answered. Then she stormed into the house with the 2 kids and left just as angrily as she arrived. I tried to stop her so I could ask her what she was doing, but she got in her car and drove off before I could even get a word in. I was left standing there with 2 kids who refused to look at me, speak to me, or even acknowledge I was there. I tried asking them who their parents were, but they didn't respond at all. I eventually gave up. My first instinct was to call Child Protective Services, but I didn't, because something told me these kids were connected to Ree's family in some way. They looked familiar, but I couldn't figure out why. Instead of calling CPS, I decided to call Ree. I told the receptionist at his resort I needed to speak to him urgently, and within minutes, I was on the phone with him, explaining everything. He said he'd be home in a few hours, then hung up. So, I was stuck with these 2 kids for the next 4 hours. The resort was close to home, so it didn't take long for him to get back. For those 4 hours, the kids deliberately avoided looking at me. I kept an eye on them the whole time. I didn't even take a bathroom break because I didn't want to leave them alone. When Ree finally came home, I immediately took him aside and told him how the kids wouldn't speak to me and how they'd been whispering to each other the entire time they were here. They were careful not to let me overhear a word. This strange, secretive behavior made me paranoid, and I was about to call CPS, but Ree stopped me. He said he had already called his mother to come over and explain everything, so we'd figure things out after confronting her. I'd been trying to get a hold of Ruth the whole time, but she was ignoring my calls. However, when Ree called her just before he arrived home, she picked up and told him she'd explain everything when she got there. An hour later, Ruth showed up again. This time, she wasn't alone. She brought Ree's whole family with her, my father-in-law, Ree's older brother, 32, and his wife. I didn't know why she'd come with everyone, and they all looked just as confused as I felt. But Ree went right to the point and asked his mom about the kids. They were in the room with us, looking terrified. They kept trying to shrink into themselves, and I could tell Ruth was making them feel that way. When Ree asked who the kids were, Ruth immediately said, "They're mine." I was stunned. Of course, these weren't my kids. Ree and I had agreed to remain child-free for a few years, and if we decided to have kids later, we'd adopt. That was always the plan. So, Ruth's claim caught me completely off guard, and the rest of the family was just as shocked. Ree told her to stop joking, but she insisted, starting to tell a wild story. She claimed that 3 weeks ago, some random guy contacted her and said that I was his ex-girlfriend. According to her, I had been dating this guy for years and even had 2 kids with him. But when I got married, I just cut him and the kids out of my life. Apparently, after years of searching for me, he found me and tried to get in touch, but I blocked him. Left with no choice, he contacted Ruth, and she took the kids, then dropped them at my door to expose me as a liar and a cheater. I stood there, speechless, as Ruth went on and on with this made-up story. Once she was done, she told Ree that since I had kids now, we had to take them in and raise them because their father didn't want them. Ree didn't believe her and told her to take the kids and leave because he knew she was lying. But, unfortunately, the rest of the family seemed to buy her story. They either thought Ruth was telling the truth, or they just didn't want the responsibility of raising these kids, so they pushed them onto us. Things got heated after that, and the shouting started. Finally, Ree told everyone we'd take the kids for just 1 day, but after that, if Ruth didn't come and get them, we'd call CPS. All this time, the kids stayed in the room with us, but as soon as CPS was mentioned, they ran off and locked themselves in another room, screaming that they didn't want anyone to take them away. My in-laws saw this as a good opportunity to leave, so we were left alone with the kids. We spent the next half hour trying to calm them down, telling them no one would take them away. They finally spoke to us, which was a step forward. After a while, they came out of the room, and it was clear they'd been crying, eyes all red and swollen. We comforted them, put them to bed in the guest room, and went to sleep ourselves. We were exhausted and still confused about what was going on. Ree and I barely talked before going to bed because we were that worn out. The next morning, we discussed what to do with the kids. We couldn't keep them forever, but we also couldn't call CPS because they were terrified of that idea. Ree suggested it would help if we could prove that Ruth had brought the kids here. That's when I remembered the security cameras I'd set up outside. In all the chaos from the previous day, I'd completely forgotten about them. We rushed to the laptop to check the footage. When we played it, we saw Ruth getting out of her car with the kids. She marched them up to our door, and that's when things got crazy. One of the kids tried to break free and run back to the car, but Ruth grabbed him and shook him roughly. The older sibling tried to stop her, but Ruth slapped him across the face. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. This explained everything. The kids were scared of Ruth, and they hadn't spoken because she told them not to. We knew something wasn't right, and we wanted to call the police, but seeing the terror on their faces when we mentioned CPS stopped us. Instead, we contacted a cop friend and filled him in on the situation. He told us to post the security footage online to prove that Ruth was the one who brought the kids here and to show the world they weren't ours. We posted the footage, hoping it would clear our names. Within hours, we had several comments, including an apology from my brother-in-law. Ree's dad, however, stuck by Ruth, and she demanded we take the video down or face a lawsuit. We told her to go ahead, but so far, she hasn't taken any action. The kids have been fine since then. They've told us their names but won't say anything else about their past or their parents. We haven't heard from anyone else in the family until yesterday, when my father-in-law called. We thought he was going to apologize, but instead, he screamed at us, blaming us for ruining his marriage and causing a divorce. We didn't know what he was talking about, so we called Ree's brother, who explained that after we posted the video, Ruth and Ree's dad had been fighting constantly. It all came to a head when Ruth told her husband she wanted a divorce. Now, my father-in-law is angry at us, thinking that our posting the video caused all the problems. Update 1. Hey, everyone. Got some major updates. We finally found out who the kids are and why my in-laws are splitting up. Things are pretty wild for me and Ree right now, and saying it all out loud helps me make sense of things. So, the kids are technically Ruth's grandkids, but it's not how we expected. Turns out Ruth had an affair a couple of years into her marriage and got pregnant. Right after the baby was born, she had a paternity test done, and it turned out the baby wasn't my father-in-law's, it was her affair partner's. Ruth convinced him to give up the child for adoption because she didn't want to raise a third kid after raising Ree and his brother. At the time, she was 28 and near 30, and my father-in-law didn't like it, but he agreed. He thought that since Ruth was the one who'd be dealing with the kid most, if she wasn't ready to raise it, then adoption was probably the best choice. Ruth managed to get my father-in-law to agree to let her affair partner adopt the baby when she was just 6 months old, all without his knowledge. She continued seeing her affair partner until he passed away from a stroke a couple of years ago. She'd been cheating for nearly 28 years. She stayed in touch with her daughter, and those are the kids we're talking about, aged 5 and 7. That's why they looked familiar. They had the same dark hair and eyes that Ruth and her daughter shared. Her daughter was never married, had the 2 kids with her boyfriend, but he dumped her about 2 months ago, and now she's struggling. Ruth's daughter has a drug problem, and so did her boyfriend. The kids grew up scared of anything that had to do with the law, especially CPS or cops, because Ruth always used that threat against them. Whenever Ruth visited her daughter, she would threaten to call CPS on her and take the kids away. Her daughter and boyfriend would beg her not to, but Ruth would always find a way to avoid it, training the kids to run and cry whenever those words were spoken. We saw it firsthand the other day. But after her breakup, her daughter's drug problem got worse, and she stopped functioning. She couldn't take care of herself, let alone her kids. She lost her job at a local grocery store and had no money left. Ruth realized she couldn't leave the kids with her daughter anymore, so she dumped them on me and Ree last week. She then dropped her daughter off at rehab. She finally came clean to my father-in-law about everything. She's the one paying for her daughter's rehab since she has no money of her own, so she had to rely on my father-in-law for that. After she told him, they fought. Apparently, Ree's dad said some things, and Ruth then told him that she didn't need his help with the money anymore and that she wanted a divorce. She left the house and has been living with Ree's older brother since then. We didn't know where she was until Ree's brother spilled the beans. My father-in-law's been miserable since Ruth left. Ree's been checking on him every day to make sure he's okay. The kids are still with me, and they're doing much better now. They still won't talk about their parents, but I get it now. I'm going to take care of them until their mother gets out of rehab or until they have somewhere better to go. Update 2. It's been 2 weeks since my last post, and today my in-laws officially decided to get back together. The divorce is off. They made up a few days ago after Ree's dad went to check on Ruth and found her with his older son. They talked it through, and Ruth convinced him that in the first years, she only loved her affair partner, but after that, she focused on her husband. She only stayed in touch with him for their daughter and nothing else. Ree's dad believes her, and he's decided to give her another chance and work on their marriage. I don't know what's going on in their heads, but as long as they're happy, it's none of my business. Ree's confused too, but I told him not to discuss any of this with his parents. They're grown-ups and can do what they want with their lives. I've told him Ruth isn't someone I trust or like, so the less we have to do with her, the better. As for the kids, Ree's brothers decided to take them in. I have to go back to work full-time next week since I'm a teacher, and I can't keep them here permanently. Ree and I will miss them, though. Even though they wouldn't talk about their parents, they'd chatter with us all day, and I'm happy they felt safe with us. I trust Ree's brother, they're good people, but they're a little too trusting for their own good. I made them promise not to leave the kids alone around Ruth, and they agreed. The way Ruth lost it with the kids the day she dropped them off was terrifying. If their biological mom had been around, she probably would have called the cops on Ruth for how she treated them. We've been getting the kids familiar with Ree's brother and his wife before they move in with them, and so far, things are going well. I hope it continues after they move out. Update 3. The kids have been living with my brother-in-law and his wife for a week now, and they're doing much better. They've started attending a nearby public school and are happier and more lively than when they first arrived. My sister-in-law was a stay-at-home wife, and she's happy with the new arrangement. Ree and I haven't heard from Ruth since the day she dropped the kids off at my place and accused me of cheating when she's the real cheater. We can forgive the affair, but we can't forgive her trying to ruin my marriage and dumping her grandkids on me. She could have gone to my brother-in-law if she really cared about them, but instead, she chose to ruin my image in marriage. I'm lucky Ree is a good, trusting man who didn't believe everything his mom said about me. That's why our marriage is still intact. If he'd believed her, we probably would have broken up by now. Ree's dad is upset that his parents are staying together after everything Ruth did, but it's their choice, and Ree's respecting it. I don't want him to get involved in their relationship. He's very mad about what Ruth did and believes she's failed her kids, but I don't want him confronting her about it. I just don't want to deal with her anymore, talk to her, see her, or hear from her. She's a toxic person who's already tried to ruin my relationship, and I won't let her do it again. My father-in-law has apologized to me for not believing me when Ruth lied about me and for blaming us for posting the footage of her mistreating the kids. I don't buy it, though. I don't think people change overnight, and I want nothing to do with him. Ree can keep in touch with him, but I won't be attending any more family parties hosted by them. Update 4. It's been just over 3 months, and Ruth's other daughter, my half-sister-in-law, finally got out of rehab 2 weeks ago. My brother-in-law and his wife have continued to take care of the kids and will keep doing so for the foreseeable future since Ruth's daughter isn't ready to raise them on her own yet. She's living with Ruth and my father-in-law, which is just crazy to me because my father-in-law is living with his wife's affair partner's daughter. I don't have the heart to forgive a cheater like that. Maybe I just don't have the kind of forgiveness that some people do, but I think it's ridiculous. If it works for them, fine. We still haven't spoken to Ruth or any of them. We won't in the future either because Ruth is just a terrible person, and I'm sticking to my decision to cut her off. She's tried to reach out to Ree again, but he loves me too much to even think about talking to her, and I love him for that. Ree's also told me that the kids are likely going to get adopted by his brother soon because they've gotten so attached to them. Since their dad doesn't want them anymore and their mom can't raise them, it will probably be easier for my brother-in-law to get custody. They haven't done anything legally yet, but I really hope they do because, honestly, it's the best thing for the kids.